there. In this video, we are going to be finding the values that make a denominator equal to 0, as well as solving these rational equations. Now, let's start with the problem on the left here. We'll call it problem 1. We need to know what values of x would make the denominators equal to 0. Well, if I look at this denominator, I can see that if x is 0, that denominator would equal 0. And if I look at this denominator, I see that if x is 2, then I would get a 0 in the denominator. And you can do that if you want to just by setting those denominators equal to 0. Makes it a little easier to see it. Now, we want to solve this equation here. And what I like to do first is to identify the common denominator. So the common denominator here is really that x times the x minus 2. And I picked that out because of this denominator with an x and the denominator with an x minus 2. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our fractions here, and I'm going to go ahead and factor this first one just by pulling out an x. We're going to multiply by that common denominator. In fact, every fraction in this problem, I'm going to multiply by that common denominator. You may be asking why, and I think you're going to see it pretty quickly here once we start multiplying. We are multiplying by the common denominator. Okay, so let's watch what happens when we multiply. You may think of that common denominator over 1. That might be easier when you're looking at it. Let's multiply these two fractions. I want you to see that we get 10x times x minus 2. I literally multiplied across the top, and I'm multiplying across the bottom. Okay, let's do it with the second fraction. I get 4x times x minus 2, and that's divided by x. And then I get 5x times x minus 2, and that's divided by x minus 2. Now, let's cancel what cancels. I want you to see in the first one, the x's cancel. In the second, and also the x minus 2's, I'm left with 10. In the second one, I want you to see that the x's cancel. I'm left with 4 times, keep the parentheses there, 4x minus 2. And then in the last one, I want you to see that the x minus 2's cancel, and I'm left with 5x. Now, look at what happened. When we multiplied by the common denominator, all the fractions went away. That was the purpose of multiplying by the common denominator. Now we can simplify. So let's go ahead and distribute the 4. So it gives me 4x minus 8. And that gives me 2 plus 4x equals 5x. And if I subtract 4x from both sides, I want you to see that I'll get 2 equals x. Okay, now that normally would be our solution. However, once you look back at part A, we said that if x is 2, then the denominator is 0. So we know this is not possible. And what that means is that we're going to have to say that there is no solution for this one, because the solution that we found made the denominator equal to 0. All right, let's do a second problem. I'm going to clear the board first. There we go. So let's look at problem number 2. Again, we start with identifying what makes the denominators equal to 0. So that first one, that would be x equals 10. And that second fraction would be x equals 2. Okay. Now we're getting ready to solve. Let's identify those common denominators. And you guessed it, it is that x minus 10 times x minus 2. And just like we did in problem number 1, we're going to multiply each of the fractions by that common denominator. Remember why we're doing that. We're doing that so that my denominators will go away and all my fractions will go away, in fact, and I'll be left with a pretty easy equation to solve. All right, so now we're looking for what's going to cancel, right? So we see the x minus 10s cancel, and I get 2 times x minus 2. Then I've got minus, and then the x minus 2's cancel, and I've got 3 times x minus 10. And then wonderful, in the last one, both the x minus 10 and the x minus 2 go away, and we're left with 6. Now remember, the whole purpose was to get rid of the fraction. So if when you multiply, you're left over with a fraction, then you probably did something wrong. So let's go ahead and distribute here. 2 times x will give me 2x. 2 times 2 gives me 4. Notice in this next one, I'm actually distributing -3 to that parentheses. So I get -3x and plus 30. So over here on the left, let's combine like terms. 2x minus 3x gives me -x. -4 plus 30 gives me 26. Now we'll subtract 26 from both sides. I'm left with -x equals -20. And then I'll divide both sides by -1. So x equals 20. Okay, so this one, we actually get a solution. And it doesn't make our denominator equal to 0, so we get to keep that solution. So our answer here is x equals 20. Whereas in problem number 1, we got an answer, but it made our denominator equal to 0, so we had to say no solution. So watch out for that. Make sure you check your denominators with your solution so you know if you're actually, that can be a solution. All right, I hope this helps.